Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Known primarily for his turn as Lucas McCain on Rifleman, Chuck Connors was also a professional baseball and basketball player, long-standing and prolific character actor, and a conservative activist. He's known for his memorable role in the TV series The Rifleman and the movie Old Yeller. How Chuck Connors became pals with Brezhnev, the communist leader. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Chuck Connors, American hero. The man behind the rifle. There were a lot of westerns on television in 1958, but none like The Rifleman. At the time it was considered the most violent show on TV, right alongside The Untouchables, which also aired in 1958. The Rifleman was the story of loner Lucas McCain, former Brooklyn Dodger Chuck Connors, and his son Mark, Johnny Crawford, who live on the outskirts of North Fork, New Mexico. Lucas invented a new rapid cocking rifle that enabled him to fire at a furious pace, giving him the advantage of having, sorta kinda, the world's first semi-automatic weapon. TV partier Al Williamson writes, "We used to love watching the show just to see him cock that rifle. You know, the looping underhand action Chuck Connors would use to load a round into the .44, .40 chamber. Man, he'd cock that rifle and all the bad guys would know they were messing with one bad guy." My dad used to say that Connors was known to swing his baseball bat like that in the on-deck circle as a pro ball player. We also loved to hear the rifle being fired. It was like no other gun sound on TV. The rest of the show, we'd be bored with Mark's whining and crying and forever getting himself, and ultimately Lucas, into hot water. But hey, it was a plot device. The Rifleman was developed by Sam Peckinpah, who would later make a name for himself by directing westerns like The Wild Bunch. McCain was an expert marksman who was able to fire several rounds from his specially modified Winchester Model 1892 rifle in rapid succession. The fact that there was no such thing as a Winchester Model 1892 rifle in the 1880s missed the notice of most. McCain is reluctantly forced to use his rifle during most of the show's 168 episodes, often against gunmen who have come to town to take on the Rifleman. The gentle relationship between Connors and Crawford made most viewers forget that McCain violently killed an average of 2.5 men per show. You would think that is all about him when you see his sports profile, but that is just scratching the surface. Connors wasn't always a cowboy. He was the older of two children born to Irish immigrants, Alan Francis Connors, a watchman, and Marcella Connors, a domestic servant and custodian. His childhood hobbies included hunting, reciting, and baseball. As a teenager, Connors acquired his nickname because while playing baseball, he frequently told the pitcher to "chuck it to me." During the Great Depression, the family moved from a humble home to an unheated apartment at 455 61st Street in Brooklyn. In 1934 they moved to 358 Senator Street, also in Brooklyn, where they resided for many years. Connors attributed his ambition to his family's financial hardships. He attended a Catholic grammar school and, from ages 13 to 17, he played baseball for John Flynn, a childless bank teller who formed a youth baseball team named the Bay Ridge Celtics. Flynn helped Connors develop integrity. On athletic scholarships, he attended Adelphi Academy in Brooklyn, from which he graduated in 1939, and Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey. Connors stood 6.5 feet tall and weighed slightly over 200 pounds. Although he did not graduate from Seton Hall, he majored in English and, when he won a recitation contest, discovered that he enjoyed entertaining an audience. He was a voracious reader and loved Shakespeare, often writing his own poetry. But baseball remained his lifelong passion, and he dreamed of playing first base for the Brooklyn Dodgers. In 1940, Connors persuaded the Dodgers to give him a tryout. This resulted in a contract and a $200 bonus check, the first check he had ever seen in his life, to play for their Newport News minor league team. Over the next 13 years, Connor played mainly on minor league teams for the Dodgers, the New York Yankees, and the Chicago Cubs. He was skilled enough as a first baseman to earn a scholarship to Seton Hall University, but dropped out after 2 years to become a tank warfare instructor during World War II. The Army discharged Connors on 19th of February 1946. While he was in the military, Connors played semi-professional basketball with the Wilmington, Delaware Bombers. In 1946 he played for the Rochester, New York Royals, champions of the National Basketball League. For the next several years he played both baseball and basketball, the latter during the baseball off-season. He was not just any professional athlete. He was one of only 13 men who has competed as an athlete in both the NBA and MLB. Connors' first taste of professional sports actually came in basketball when he joined the start-up Boston Celtics franchise in 1946. He soon left basketball behind when he was offered a tryout with the Dodgers. He made the team in 1949 but only appeared in one game before being sent down to the minors. He made it back to the show in 1951 after being traded to the Chicago Cubs and appeared in 66 games, batting .238 with 2 homers and 18 RBIs. Amazingly, Connors nearly made it into professional football as well after he was drafted by the Chicago Bears. The only thing that's surprising to me is that unlike most athletes who have made the transition from sports to screen roles, Connors was really quite excellent. At the moment, in fact, I can't think of a single professional athlete who was a better dramatic actor than he was. I'm not saying he was some Shakespearean or something, but he could more than carry his load in most any part he turned a hand to, and that's a rarity among people who fall back into acting after a lifetime focused on running, throwing and catching. Had he been a better hitter, he may never have made it in Hollywood. In 1952 he was again demoted to the minors, this time to Los Angeles, where he was spotted by a talent scout and signed to play in the Spencer Tracy-Katharine Hepburn film Pat and Mike. After Connors received a check for $500 for his work on the film, which was a huge boost in salary over what baseball was paying him, he said to himself, "Baseball just lost a first baseman." That said, Connors wasn't precisely a top athlete. Realizing he wouldn't attain that status, he began to broaden his horizons. He was in around 20 films prior to his most famous role, including classics like Old Yeller and The Big Country, as well as dozens of guest shots on shows like The Adventures of Superman. He would act steadily for the next 4 decades in films like Flipper and Soylent Green, and on television in Branded and Roots, but he would be best remembered as Lucas McCain, a role he remained proud of for his entire life. Thus began Connors' run as a successful character actor. He appeared supporting a who's who of 1950s stars, including Burt Lancaster, Gregory Peck and Charlton Heston. During this period of his career, Connors did yeoman's work appearing on a cornucopia of popular shows from the golden age of television, including anthology series like Schlitz Playhouse, Screen Directors Playhouse, 4-Star Playhouse, Matinee Theatre and General Electric Theatre, which was hosted by Ronald Reagan. He also appeared on westerns like Gunsmoke and Wagon Train. While there were always good guys and bad guys, the good guys didn't always win. Running for 168 episodes, it quickly rocketed to number 4 in the ratings on the strength of Connor's quiet charisma and the show's impeccable and compelling writing. It was the first show to feature a widowed father raising a son alone, a trope that would later come to be de rigueur among single dad shows from the era when divorce was still a social taboo. Connors himself was married a total of 3 times. The first was to Elizabeth Jane Riddell Connors, whom he met at one of his baseball games. He met his second wife, actress Kamala Devi, on the set of the 1962 film Geronimo, and he met his third wife, Faith Quabius, on a third set, that of the 1973 dystopian classic Soylent Green. After The Rifleman ended, Connors moved on to Branded, which had similarly superior writing for a television show of its era. The show told the story of Jason McCord, an Army cavalry soldier wrongly accused of cowardice during the Indian Wars. Much like The Rifleman, it largely dealt with McCord's wanderings from place to place, piggybacking off his experience in anthology television. The show was much less popular and much shorter-lived, lasting only 2 seasons. After The Rifleman and Branded, Connors struggled in the film industry. This wasn't due to a lack of popularity. On the contrary, it was because Connors was so closely associated with the role of Lucas McCain, a beloved and iconic character that he found it difficult to find work. All casting agents could see was Lucas McCain. Still, Connors was able to find work, and while few things can rival The Rifleman in terms of writing and storytelling, he kept busy and kept paid, taking on roles in the film version of Flipper and Night Gallery, the latter a return to his days on the anthology television circuit in the 1950s. One of the most unlikely friendships to ever come about between an actor and a fan developed when Western television star Chuck Connors, a lifelong Republican, became pals with the communist leader of the Soviet Union, Leonid Brezhnev. He was not just the favourite of us, but the actor was a favourite of a famous Soviet leader. The Rifleman was one of the few Western shows available for viewing in the Soviet Union. This was in no small part thanks to it being the favourite show of the Soviet premier, one Leonid Brezhnev. The pair eventually met in June 1973 while the premier was on a trip. It turned out that the Soviet leader was a huge fan of Connors' Western series The Rifleman, which debuted on September 30th, 1958 and aired for 5 seasons. Brezhnev loved the series so much that he made it the only American television show to be broadcast in Russia. Connors would later return the favour by visiting his friend in Moscow during the Cold War. Connors presented him with 2 Colt single-action army pistols. The pair got along famously, with Brezhnev inviting Connors to the Soviet Union in December of that year. Connors petitioned the government to be part of the official delegation for Brezhnev's funeral in 1982, but was denied. Despite his friendship with Brezhnev, Connors was a strong supporter of conservative Republican candidates. He was a prominent supporter of President Richard Nixon and campaigned diligently for Senator Barry Goldwater's Quixotic campaign in 1964. He campaigned vigorously for personal friend Ronald Reagan in all 3 of his major bids and marched in support of the Vietnam War. When Premier Brezhnev died in 1982, Connors tried to attend his funeral in Moscow, but was barred by the State Department. Coincidentally, Connors' death came in 1992, exactly 10 years to the day after his friend Leonid died. Connors was a hero to young children and grown men alike because of his role in The Rifleman. The writing drove the show, but Connors' everyman presence made the role relatable to a broader audience. His acting was steeped in the stage traditions that bled over into television at the dawn of the medium. He was also among the last of a dying breed, the patriotic show business person. By the 1960s, it was hard to take a stand against student protests and urban rioting, even if you were John Wayne. But Chuck Connors wasn't John Wayne. Like Ronald Reagan, he was a television actor, not a film star, who had the strength of his convictions, despite never being an A-lister. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit our Patreon page. It is no wonder that Chuck Connors' net worth was a bad guy with ease. Watch this video and find out how Robert Duvall became a popular actor with virtually no acting.